Brant is here to drop the anchor both figuratively and literally. And in this video, I'm going to teach you how to play Brant, how to build Brant, and what his best teams are. Moving first onto how his kit works. So Brant is a fusion sword character focusing on basic attack damage. His basic attacks are just that. They are going to just be a normal hit of sword attacks. However, where Brant differs is that, unlike most characters, he has mid-air attacks, which do significantly more damage than his grounded basic attacks. However, unlike Chang-Li, if you want to continue these aerial attacks, you actually have to hit enemies. For the first and second aerial attack, you can choose to hold the button down to get extra hits. However, this is not required. His resonance skill is incredibly simple. He simply sends himself into the air. Yeah, that's it. He literally just sends himself into the air. This is a good way to initiate his aerial attacks, but I'm gonna be honest, you can also just jump, so the skill is really not that important. For his Resonance Liberation, he decides to take a bit more of a direct approach compared to other pirates, and straight up rams the enemy with his anchor. This doesn't do much damage on its own, but the reason why you want to use it is because after using his Resonance Liberation, he will gain a buff that allows him to generate more Forte and gives him more attack based on his energy regen. Speaking of which, let's move on to his Forte. He has a passive effect that gives Brant a very large amount of attack based on his energy regen, capping out at 280% energy regen. You are going to be building a lot of ER on him because of this. Additionally, his Forte bar will be charged whenever you deal damage to enemies using basic attacks or his skill. And once it is full, you can use his Resonance skill to straight up drop the anchor on enemies, doing a very large amount of damage. This is actually the majority of Brant's damage output. Additionally, Brant will heal the team when his Forte reaches certain intervals, and whenever he uses his Forte skill, he will give all allies a shield based on his energy regen. Moving on to his intro skill, Brant is going to fly in and start in midair. When you initiate your basic attack after this, you automatically start at the second midair attack sequence, unless he falls to the ground or he's interrupted. The main reason to use this intro skill is for the little bit of Forte generation, but also the second basic attack is one of his better ones, so yeah, the intro skill is pretty good, but by no means required. And then for his outro skill, it's going to grant the next teammate 20% fusion damage amplification and 25% skill damage amplification. So this is going to make him very good with any fusion or skill-based damage dealers. Brant's first inherent skill is going to give him 20% more healing from his Forte, which isn't that impressive, but it is a nice bonus. What you are, however, looking forward to is his second inherent skill. It's going to give him 15% fusion damage for free, as well as giving him interruption resistance during his mid-air attacks. This is very convenient, and I'd say is very important to get. For his level up priority, definitely level up his Forte circuit first, it's most of his damage. However, you shouldn't be ignoring his basic attack either. As for his Resonance Liberation, you can get it to like level 6, but its damage is not that impressive, so I wouldn't put too many resources into it. His Resonance skill and intro skill can be ignored pretty safely in my opinion. But now that we know how this flamboyant performer works, he needs a good weapon to actually do some work. Starting off with his signature sword, the Unflickering Valor. While its base attack might not be high for a 5-star, it makes up for this by granting a huge amount of energy regen, which automatically means more attack for Brant. Its passive will also give you 8% crit rate and a bunch of basic attack damage bonus, which all of Brant's damage is going to be, except for his Liberation. This is by far Brant's best weapon, not even close to be honest. Skipping out on this weapon is going to massively damper your performance on Brant. So if you want to get Brant, definitely get his weapon as well. But if you do not have it, there is, I guess, an alternative. You can go for any of the crit 5-star swords, being the Red Spring, Emerald of Genesis, or the Blazing Brilliance. However, because these swords give no energy regen to speak of, it would be better to run Brant on Molten Rift with double ER main stats, because you are not actually capable of triggering the 5-piece effect for the Tight-Breaking Courage if you run a sword that does not have energy regen. But what about Overture, you might ask? That's a 4-star weapon with energy regen. Well, its passive has literally no offensive benefit, so you're really only using it as an ER stick, and it is going to do worse than any of the crit 5-star swords. However, if you don't have any of those, it is going to be your best bet. And then finally, if you actually have nothing else, you can go for the Sword of Voyager, which is a 3-star. But it is such a massive damage decrease that honestly, if you don't have a 5-star sword for Brant, just don't pull him. But if you already pulled him and you want to use him, there you go, Sword of Voyager is your best free-to-play option. Now that Brant has a proper weapon, it's time to start looking into his echoes. So what is his best echo set? If you're using an energy regen sword, you're going to aim to use 5-piece Tide Breaking Courage. This set has perfect synergy with Brant, giving you extra energy regen, attack, and then finally, when he reaches 250% energy regen, he also gains a bunch of damage bonus. This is by no stretch of the imagination his signature set, and should be farmed for if your sword has energy regen. However, if it does not, your best bet is to aim for 5-piece Molten Rift, because if you are not using an energy regen sword, you cannot reach the 250% needed. So, if you cannot reach that 250%, you should just aim to use 5-piece Molten Rift, giving you a bunch of fusion damage bonus after using your skill, and just some fusion damage bonus in general. So this is going to be the better option if you cannot reach that 250%. For his main stats, you're going to want to get a crit 4 cost. For his free cost, you're going to either run double energy regen or energy regen and fusion damage bonus, based on if he caps out on his 280% or not, and then for his 1 cost, you go for attack percent. Most weapons are going to run double ER. However, if you run his signature and you have too many ER substats, you can easily go for ER infusion damage. When it comes to building Brant, it's all about maximizing his energy regen while not going over that 280%. So if you have too much energy regen, going for a fusion damage free cost can help you get some damage bonus instead of just wasting your stats. So now that Brant is built, it's time to finally look into his team comps. And he does have quite a bit, so I'm going to try and shrink it down to archetypes. First of all, we are going to be talking about specifically Chang Li, because they have near perfect synergy together. Brant's Ultra skill gives Chang Li both of the stats she really wants, being fusion damage amplification and skill damage amplification. So it's literally a perfect Ultra skill. Brant also does a lot of damage in this team, allowing for you to have 2 characters putting out a lot of damage on their own. This is going to be Chang Li's new best comp. You can either play it simply by just running it as a hyper carry Chang Li comp, or you can choose to quick swap between these two, which works fine because Brant and Chang Li are what I like to call leader and follower quick swappers. Leaders, like Brant, like to take up all the field time they can get to try and gain a resource or spend a resource. For example, Brant's Forte. And meanwhile, Chang Li, as a follower, will just swap in whenever there's a good window for Brant to swap out, allowing her to use her cooldowns real quick, and then you can go back to Brant to charge his Forte. Speaking of quick swap, Brant will be able to quick swap quite well with any other follower character. So my definition of a follower is a character with either a forgiving uptime or a character who doesn't really need to grind a specific resource while they're on field. And Shang Liao with his forgiving 28-second ult duration counts as a follower character. So he is going to be a very strong character to use with Brant while quick swapping, with Brant taking the majority of the field time and Shang Liao swapping in whenever his skill is ready. You can also choose to quick swap him with Phoebe, for example, who doesn't really need to be on field for any specific reason other than to do her basic attacks, which allow her to use her Forte. So essentially, any character that doesn't need to be on field for an extended period of time is going to be great for Brant to quick swap with. And then, he can also buff hyper carries with his skill damage bonus amplification. Now, I've already mentioned Chang Li, but Brant is also going to work pretty well with Jinxi and Carlotta, and also Encore because his Ultra skill gives fusion damage and skill damage. Now, while Brant is not best in slot for any of these characters, he is a viable alternative, assuming that the best in slot character is not on your account or already used in a different team. However, I have to say for Jinxi specifically, you will have to use Farina as your third slot in order to charge her Forte with coordinated attacks. And then finally, there is Hyper Carry Brant. While this is not the best Hyper Carry team out there, Brant is very capable of using wuwa to buff almost all of his damage, and because wuwa has such a fast rotation, the DPS of this team is not too shabby. You're going to want to use 2 of Brant's intro skills. After Shorekeeper does her rotation, Brant is going to be charging his Forte on field, and then after that you're going to do wuwa's rotation, go back to Brant, use his Forte skill, then his Liberation, and then you can charge up another Forte skill. This is going to be the best way to play this team. And then finally, let's look at Brant's sequences. His first sequence will temporarily stagnate enemies whenever Brant uses Forte skill. Additionally, after Brant either does a flip during his aerial basics, or his intro skill, Brant will gain 20% damage bonus for up to 3 times. This has the potential to be an incredibly powerful sequence, so if used correctly, you're going to get a lot of extra damage out of your Brant for this. His second sequence will give 30% crit rates to Brant's Forte skill and his mid-air attacks. And additionally, after his outro skill, Brant will do an extra hit of fusion damage whenever characters buffed by his outro skill use their resonance skill. This can trigger up to 2 times, so it's clearly meant to be for Changli, but it can be used by other characters like Jinchi and Carlotta as well. His third sequence will increase the damage multiplier of his Forte by 42%. Pretty good sequence considering his Forte skill is the biggest bit of damage in his kit. His sequence 4 will increase the shield given by his Forte by 20%, and will also make it so nearby resonators restore HP based on Brant's energy regen. It's not that good honestly, but if you're having some trouble surviving, I guess it would work. But I don't see why you would struggle with surviving when Brant is on your team. S5 will give Brant 15% basic attack damage bonus after doing basic attack damage, so it's essentially permanent uptime on 15% damage bonus. It's pretty underwhelming, but it's there, I guess. And then for his S6, the damage multiplier of Brant's mid-air attacks is increased by 30%, and his Forte skill will do a secondary blast dealing 30% of its damage. So, to say it in quick words, a 30% damage increase to his primary damaging tools. So, that's pretty nice. It's by no means as broken as something like a Jinchi or a Phoebe or a Camellia S6, but it is still a good S6. If you learned something new from this guide, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the comments, but if you want to make sure that I read them, be sure to join my Discord instead. I'm pretty active in there, so I'll be able to answer any questions you have, but that'll be it from me. Peace.